Hello to everybody. We are at the event Seminar Roundtable Public Finances in Slovenia in the context of the European economic governance and reimplementation of the fiscal rule. It's held on November 29th, 2023, and with you, I am Anita Hrast from IRDO Institute. This project is research carried out within the framework of the Central European Professors Network, coordinated by the Central European Academy. I would like to invite Professor Dr. Rado Bohinc to introduce himself as a leader of the project in Slovenia. Please, Professor Bohinc, if you may say hello to everybody.
Yes, I would like to welcome everybody on this promotion dissemination event. It has to do with research in the context of our cooperation with within the Central European Professors Network and Central European Academy. And what we are preparing is a monograph, a comparative monograph related to financial system in Central and Eastern European countries. We are representing here Slovenian part of this research, and we are preparing parts related to fiscal issues, tax issues, state aid issues, and monetary issues in Slovenia, which will be a part of the monograph, which is going to be edited at Central European Academy. The aim of this event is to present the research results so far, and to present also some views and proposals on current issues in public finance, especially in the context of European economic governance and reimplementation of fiscal rule in the Republic of Slovenia. Special aspects here are the issue of sovereignty, developmental sovereignty of member states in related to European economic governance. And I'm going to share with you a few words on this issue later on.
Thank you, Professor Bohinc. I would just like to introduce to you, it will be a duration of 1 hour, this event. It is for free, and language of the seminar will be English. And also privacy notice, this event is recorded. So if you are here, you agree with promotion of the event also through other media channels. Thank you for this. And now I would like to introduce you invited speakers and our program. At first, Professor Dr. Rado Bohinc will present as public finance system in Slovenia and European economic governance. Then Professor Dr. Dušan Jovanović will present tax aspects and public finances in Slovenia. Later, Professor Dr. Borut Bratina will present as news in the field of state aid and the impact on public finances. And later also Professor Dr. Meira Festic will join us. She will present us current issues of European monetary policy. So thank you all invited speakers for co-creating this event. And now I would like to invite to the floor Professor Dr. Rado Bohinc, who will present us public finance system in Slovenia and European economic governance. So Professor Bohinc, the floor is yours. Please, if you may share the screen now with your PowerPoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As we have already explained, this is a part of the comparative project of 6 Central and Eastern European countries. And the focus is European economic governance, and also from the aspects of sovereignty and also from the aspects of efficiency. I will focus in my contribution to European economic governance. I'm talking about the system which was introduced in the years 2011 and 2013 with two documents, Stability and Growth Pact and Intergovernmental Treaty on Stability, Coordination and Governance. You all know that the reforms of European economic governance are currently undergoing intensive political and professional debate. And what we would like today is also to formulate some suggestions, some assessment related to this discussion as our contribution to the discussion. Let me start with the following. European economic governance is undoubtedly strongly affects the relation between the EU and member states. And for this reason, it reasonably raises the questions of sovereignty and democratic governance within the European Union. As well, it raises the issues of balance of economic and social aspects of development. As you know very well, European semester is the main tool of European economic governance. I will use the abbreviation EEG for European economic governance from now on. This European semester, ES, consists of three pillars. The first pillar is budgetary surveillance, the second pillar is macroeconomic surveillance, and the third pillar is socio-economic coordination. Let me remind you, in 2017, the scope of ES widened with a social dimension within the third pillars through European Pillar of Social Rights. There is also a fourth pillar. It is called, it encompasses financial solidarity. It was formed by two so-called two-pack, the European Stability Mechanism and the Fiscal Compact. But this fourth pillar doesn't play a relevant role during the semester. However, because all the macroeconomic and budgetary processes are part of the first three pillars. So these three pillars are budgetary, macroeconomic, socioeconomic, are relevant. ES, European semester, has reshaped the architecture of European economic governance. It challenges the pursuit of social and economic objectives in deliberation between national and supranational actors, between member states and between European Union bodies, Commission, the Council, and the Parliament. So the ES has evolved considerably since its creation in 2010. It starts from being purely reinforced monitoring of national budgets and reforms. And nowadays, it drives convergence towards agreed binding fiscal and monetary standards. And the key objectives of European semesters are to contribute to convergence and stability in the EU, to ensure sound public finance, to prevent excessive macroeconomic imbalances, and to monitor the implementation of national so-called recovery and resilience plans. And also it coordinates and monitor employment and social policies. It is a very demanding timetable as far as European semester is concerned, demanding for member states and for the EU. It is divided into 4 periods: autumn, winter, spring, and summer forecast. And the main goal, a very demanding goal, is adoption of national budgets in compliance with EU rules and EU recommendations regarding indebtedness and regarding budget deficit. And there are strict rules referring to indebtedness and budget rules, budget deficit, and these rules are also sanctioned. So sanction follows in the case of breach of these rules. So this process is logistically and substantively a very complex one. And let me say now, I will try to summarize this at the end, but let me say now that this process, being so complex, being so demanding, should be simplified, or at least reduced as far as the time frame is concerned. I'm going to explain this a little later. Nowadays, it's a huge organizational, professional, and political task. Political and professional bodies, a number of them are included in the level of EU and at the level of member states. They cooperate intensively in all periods. Let me remind you, it starts all in February, March, where Commission in its country reports publishes which reforms are to be taken by member states, which macroeconomic, fiscal, and budgetary reforms, and the Commission would give forecasts for the so-called country-specific recommendation implementation. To what extent countries have implemented the so-called recommendation, which are specific for the country, given by European Commission. And then in April, in May, member states submit their programs according to these recommendations. This would be a national reform program, this would be stability or convergence, depending if being a member of monetary union or not. In June and July, the Council formally adopts country-specific recommendations. After extensive discussion in numerous EU bodies, these CSRs are drafted after a detailed analysis of member states' programs, a thorough assessment of progress made from the previous year, from the previous country-specific recommendation. And finally, in November and December, national budgets are enacted after member states submit their draft budgetary plans to the Commission, and Commission assess. So Commission is very involved in what is enacted. Let me give you just for an example for the EU, of the EU 23 recommendation to Slovenia, how concrete, how precise these recommendations are. The Commission has recommended Slovenia investment in digital transition, energy security, reduction of fossil fuels, acceleration of use of renewable energy sources, strengthening electricity distribution network, building energy infrastructure, and so on. So investment fields on one side, and on the other side, fiscal policy recommendation challenges in the terms or in the field of budget deficit and in the field of indebtedness. You see here from 4.1% of GDP in 2023, we should reduce, according to this so-called recommendation, the deficit down to 1.3 in 2026. We have much bigger problems for budget deficit in the year 2004 and 2025, when we, as compared to the situation right now. So I think we should have a big challenge to fulfill, to implement this recommendation. And also for reduction of countries' consolidated debt. Now we have close to 70% of the GDP, and it should be reduced down to 63.5 in GDP in 2026. Also a very big challenge. But I have put this just to see how concrete this, let me not say directions, but recommendations, unless they are strict and they are sanctioned, are. EEG, let me start to summarize. It has important results in coordination of member state policies. However, as I said, the question of economic development and sovereignty is here. In a way, member states are pushed into the position of executives of professional structures and timelines of the EU officials. However, member states consented to transfer a part of their sovereign rights to the European Union by even amending constitutions. In Slovenia was the case that we have amended constitution with so-called golden fiscal rule. So this is the fact. And European economic governance definitely brings benefits to the member state and to the EU. So it is in our joint interests. EEG contributes decisively to greater stability and balanced development in the member state, and increasingly contributes to resilience, recovery, and sustainable development. However, EEG raises the question of sovereignty, as I said, and the question also of balance of economic and social development. What are the steps that we should make in the future? I'm going to start to conclude with this. European economic governance needs to be upgraded, deficiencies eliminated, it should be simplified, it should be democratically consolidated. EU needs more balance between economic and social goals, and it should overcome approach that the social sphere is of secondary meaning, and it's not regulated only by soft law. As I said, the procedures are excessively burdensome. Simplification is needed. Reorientation from annual to medium-term planning is needed. However, the democratic principles may be strictly observed. Those principles on which the EU is built, like subsidiarity and proportionality. The EG deals with economic policies and fiscal balances in the member state. But what European economic governance concept neglects? It neglects the member states' reflection of the EU position in the global space, strategic issues of the EU competitive position in the world, aspects of global sustainable development. So European economic governance is not only the governance of member states, but it is also the governance of EU as a whole. Let me conclude with the following. The European economic governance reform must include the 2023 Commission proposal for more gradual path for the introduction of national medium-term fiscal structure plans, and a proposed stricter enforcement regime and more control over the member state is acceptable only for medium-term fiscal structure planning. And to conclude, the treaty reference values like 3% of GDP deficit and 60% of GDP debt, and the excessive deficit procedure in the case of breach of the 3% deficit are obsolete. They need further, deeper reflection from the point of view of the new European economic governance concept. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Buhinc. Now I would like to give the floor to Professor Dusan Jovanovic. The floor is yours. You can share the screen if you want.
So first of all, I must apologize for a limited time because I have still lectures in the afternoon, and also I have to apologize with the problem of my voice, which is also the result of intensive lectures so far. So I will use a method of keys, which means keep it short and simple. And I hope that you will be satisfied with that part. Actually, my title is slightly different than it was announced. but it
Professor
covers
Ivanovic,
the same
Professor
thing,
Ivanovic,
actually.
sorry
Yes?
to interrupt. Whole her, if you can maybe share the presentation, not only the,
Okay.
On page.
yes, if you are going further.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
okay.
now is the
Okay.
second. Yeah, thank you.
So I
Full
divide
screen.
my
Full screen.
full screen. It is actually in full screen, but I have to go to the presentation like this.
Okay, no problem. You
Okay.
if you are going
So
manual, it's okay.
it's okay.
Yeah, just
Okay.
okay.
So I divide my presentation on three different parts. First of all, the elements of Slovenian tax sovereignty. Then it will be some problems which we actually have, or our position to the sovereignty at all. And the third thing is how we react on some EU proposals on tax issues in Slovenia. So first of all, tax sovereignty represents actually the government exclusive authority. That means that the taxes within the territorial jurisdiction and the principle of crucial for the state action operation. And first of all, it becomes from the Constitution of the Republic of Slovenia, actually from the Article 146 and Article 147, which means that we stipulate the both the Republic of Slovenia and the local community found their obligation through taxes, compulsory fees, and income from their assets. And the 147 article mandates that Slovenia establish taxes, custom duties, and other obligations to the legislation. We have to mention that also have a newly Article 3A of the Constitution, which lays the foundation for international engagements, such as EU and NATO membership. And this article permits Slovenia to delegate some sovereign rights to the international organizations through ratified treaties, provided they uphold human rights, democracy, and their rule of law, which is actually very important. In some cases, we will be mentioned a little bit further in the EU level. So some problems which we have peculiarities and reforming Slovenian tax law, which is also concerning the tax competition, is that we actually wish to develop a competitive tax system, and the tax reforms that Slovenia implemented in the last couple of years intending to address the critical tax issues. And I point out just three main things. First of all is OECD principle says that our taxation on the property is very low.
Dusan, do we need the next page?
It's already next page.
Didn't you talk beyond this one?
Yeah, you have to go manually because you didn't share the screen, only the PowerPoint, and Zoom has some problems with sharing. So if
But
you,
it says that we are sharing the screen, so I have to stop and put it again.
yeah, and then share the whole screen, not only PowerPoint. Share and
Okay.
screen, and then now we see. Now
it's okay.
Yeah, now it's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
So about the property, I have to stress out that Slovenia has a 0.6% of taxation of the property comparing with the GDP. The EU level is 1.8% of GDP, and for example, in France, they even have 4% of the taxation of the property, which means that we have still nice way to go further to reach that 4% or even 1.8 for the average level in the EU. Taxation of income is also one of the challenge of Slovenian tax competitiveness, which means that we are still in a high personal income tax burden, and we have to reduce that part if we want to be competitive with the other EU countries. Other changes or challenges which we have is also the reform of corporate income taxation. Reforms such as the reform of the fiscal validation of recipes, which is kind of newly legislation in Slovenia. Now we are prepared. We didn't adopt yet, but still recent attempt to the tax balance sheet total of banks. And of course, there are some arguing about the taxation of the capital gains without exemptions, which is kindly uncompetitive movement which Slovenia did in the last period. So relationship between the national and the national tax policy and EU law, I have to admit that we have large or we are fully comply with the EU taxation level, which means that we don't have a lot of different positions, even that I saw in our investigation that some countries have a lot of different opinions about the EU level and the EU tax treaties. So I just found like 3 different cases, which there is no time to explain all of them, but mostly we arguing except anti-avoidance tax measures, which are a little bit different in the position from the competitiveness of the Slovenia, except EU law treatments. The second part of my representation is to find out some crucial points between harmonization and the tax sovereignty of Slovenia. And the Slovenia has a compliant tax system, which I already mentioned, with the EU. Its tax laws are generally in accordance with the actually all tax directives in EU level. That indicates that we are not so open on a political or legal confrontation that can be seen in the field of harmonization of tax law and the tax sovereignty. The most evident in the position of that part is a sovereignty of National Assembly of the Republic of Slovenia, which means that we have the highest political body, which in majority cases did not have reservation when providing opinions on proposal for the EU acts. Actually, I checked almost all proposals for EU tax proposals, and we didn't give any or just few of them as a different opinion to the EU level, which I'm strongly support the idea that we are fully complied with all EU requirements, which not necessarily means that we are satisfied with that kind of position. About the approach to the qualified decision making in the field of taxes, actually I saw just one special unpleasant idea of the Slovenian idea of the qualified decision making, which means that Slovenia as a small member state demonstrates that actually in the concept of voting by consensus in the tax related decisions, we are not satisfied with that kind of qualified decision making proposal. But even if we don't have any complaints, we are still not very satisfied that if we will adopt on the EU level the qualified decision also for the EU taxes, that could be or could have the influence of the Slovenian sovereignty of that part of tax. About the global minimum tax proposal, which it comes from the EU. We didn't implement that part already in the Slovenian law, but we prepared a draft version, which is fully complied with everything what was actually meant from the EU level. I don't know when we will try to adopt this, probably at the end of this year, I hope, because the fiscal year is actually almost over and we need some specialties for the beginning with the 1st of January. It is possible that Slovenia did not have specific objection to this directive, and that the issue it highlights are mostly of administrative nature in terms of the effective implementation of the law provision in practice. That's the only thing which we kindly have an opinion on that global minimum tax. We also have some ideas and some implementation regarding to the BEFIT and AFIT directives. So, which is mostly convert into the changes of our tax law implementing to the companies, and some ideas on Corporate Tax Act actually comply with the AFIT 3 directive. The third ideas is how we use the tools to fight against tax avoidance in Slovenia, which is generally very interesting, especially when we are comparing General Anti-Avoidance Rule and the Slovenian Tax Procedure Act. The newly case said that we also have some recent problems connecting with the corporate law, special on the way of treasury shares in limited companies, but still the Slovenian court says that the legal system in general prohibition of tax avoidance arise from the 4th paragraph of 74 article of Tax Procedure Act, and it's fully complied with the anti-tax avoidance rule. But still, when we have the problem with implementation of that anti-avoidance idea, we usually somehow use that part as strongly support, show the sovereignty of Slovenia, how we can determine that part of the avoidance of the tax rules. About the Global Minimum Tax Act, we actually based on OECD and EU activities, and our proposal has been prepared but not accepted. But a little bit more specifically, we are about that common consolidated corporate tax base, which means that we have finally some different opinions about that proposal. First of all, we actually believe that that proposal, particularly for the small economies as Slovenia is, presents significant implementation and exclusion challenges. At the systematic level, the purpose has both positive and negative effects, depending on the valuation solution that will be put in place. And
we are out
maintain
of time.
Slovenia.
We are out of
Yes,
time.
I will be short in a minute. Slovenia maintained that proposal lacks sufficiently clear and proven arguments for unconditional support. And if I have to conclude everything what I research in that kind of sovereignty, compliance, and everything connecting with Slovenian tax level, so we demonstrate that it tax sovereignty within the boundaries set by the Constitution of the Republic of Slovenia, while also taking into account the transfer sovereignty in the EU level. It is important to preserve Slovenian tax sovereignty by interpreting the EU rules on tax legislation, harmonization, and also in the way that does not exactly encroach upon the sovereignty of EU member states. Slovenia, in pursuit of tax sovereignty, seeks to regulate the taxation of assets and reduce the tax burden on labor income. We are follow the rules and international organizations like BEFIT and APET, and within the permissible tax sovereignty shapes tax regulation. We also prepared all the proposal, especially for minimum tax law, but I hope that we will accept that until the end of that year. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Jovanovic, for great details also. So now I would like to give the floor to Professor Dr. Borut Bratina.
Hello.
The floor is yours, yes, and I have to share, I think, your presentation.
Yes, please. Yeah.
If you agree. Just
First
a
slide,
moment.
please. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes.
Anita, I just want to say hello to everyone, so I have to go because I have to be in Podčetrtek.
Okay,
Okay.
safe trip, and
Goodbye.
thank you very much for being with us.
Afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Okay, just a moment. I will share the screen immediately. Can we see it, Professor Bratina?
Yes.
Can you see the screen? Okay, so the floor is yours,
Yes.
Professor.
Yes. My theme is state aid, and I will start with the definition. Can you put the first? Yeah, thank you. Definition is in Article 107 of the Treaty of the European Union. Any aid granted by a member state or any type of aid from the state fund which could distort competition by favoring individual companies or the production of individual goods insofar as this affects trade between member states. This is a clear statement, and the state aid is generally undesirable in a free market economy, but can be a tool to prevent unwanted outcomes and achieve non-economic objectives. State aid can be a poison or cure. Since state aid necessarily interferes with market competition, or more generally, with the market and market relation, granting it is usually not simply a matter for the grantor and the recipient of the state aid in question, but also for the other market players, in particular recipients, domestic and foreign competitors. Further, state aid may also be a concern of one or more other countries due to its negative cross-border effects, and this may lead to the adoption of international agreements restricting the granting of state aid. Also, state aid is a form of market intervention in a market economy, is in principle not desirable, but it is an appropriate mean in given circumstances to prevent unwanted market outcomes and achieve certain desirable non-economic objectives. And if we put the reality, the system of state aid control in place in the EU is unique in the world. It is a supranational system that significantly constrains EU member states in their decision, especially in the areas of economic, financial, environmental, and regional policy. My hypothesis in this research is, first, the definition and regulation of state aid is an exclusive competence of the EU. Second, while fiscal policy remains the responsibility of the member state, must respect commonly rules, notably the fiscal rule. And third, a state aid is paid out of or charged to the public purse is an share space of share competence. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. In Slovenia, we have special law, Zakon o spremljanju državnih pomoči, the State Aid Monitoring Act, and a lot of bylaws in the Republic Slovenia regulate the procedure for notifying state aid obligation, the report, record state aid, and the assessment of the compliance of state aid, the need not to be notified to the European Commission. The concept and meaning of state aid in Slovenia is applied and understood as defined by EU legal sources. Let me note at the outset that it is difficult to find an area in EU law where the sovereignty of member states in economic and fiscal policy is more limited. Next slide, please. State aid report in Republic of Slovenia. The problem of state aid in Slovenia is best illustrated by considering the 22nd state aid report adopted by Slovenian government in December 2022. Under the State Aid Act, the Ministry of Finance must every year prepare an annual report on state aid granted, which is submits to the government for adoption by the end of June. The report always covers data for the last 3 years to allow proper comparison and analysis. An analytic overview of state aid paid in Slovenia over the preceding 3 years is provided, and the report is an important element of ensuring transparency and control over the granting of state aid. The current report covers the 3 years 19, 20, and 21, which were marked first by the COVID-19 crisis and finally by the energy crisis caused by the war in Ukraine. In the year 21, fast 1.7 billion euros of state aid was paid in Slovenia, of which were 1.13 billion euros was tackled to the economic situation created by the outbreak of the virus, representing a large share, fast 67% of all aid paid of that year. Over the last 3 years, the structure and proportion of the biggest aid categories in Slovenia have not changed significantly. Aid for environment protection and energy, then this field still accounts for the largest share, followed by the aid for employment, research, development and innovation, and transport. State aid was mainly paid out as subsidies, amount to 422 million in year 21, or fast 75% of total aid paid out. In contrast, the volume of repayable form of aid, such as soft loans and guarantees, is not significant, representing just 0.35% of total aid. A comparison with the EU shows that Slovenia has a similar volume and structure of state aid. Exclusively excluding COVID-19 aid, Slovenia's share of such aid in 21 was just less than 1% of GDP, ranking Slovenia 15th in the EU. Another interesting feature comes from the state aid performance assessment report. This assessment is positive and consists of a summary of the report submitted by the donors. Unfortunately, this assessment is a lump sum, and the Ministry of Finance concludes that these reports from the donors are deficient and do not follow the guide of the measurement of the effectiveness of state aid granted. Of the EU level, EU data show that EU 27 member states spent 320 billion euros in the 2020 on state aid for COVID-19 and other measures. This amount is almost 2.5 times the expenditure in 2019. This crisis triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020 had a major impact on the Slovenian, European and global economy. In this report, government expenditure on COVID-19 relief aid is considered in aggregate for 2020 and 2021. This allows for a more comprehensive overview and better analysis of the data. Of course, not all measures implemented under the intervention law constituted as state aid. Some data, Germany paid out most state aid in absolute terms. In comparison with Slovenia, it's like the equivalent is equal. The general trend over the last decade shows a steady increase in state aid expenditure, with a big jump in 2020 due to the COVID-19 crisis. In Slovenia, crisis measures were adopted on the basis of the 10 national intervention law, which previously had to be aligned with the statutory conditions of the temporary framework and the conditions of Article 107 of Treaty Functioning European Union, in order to deal with the consequences of the damage caused by COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, all measures implemented under the intervention law constitute state aid. The total direct volumes of COVID-19 related measures in 2020 and 2021 in Slovenia amounted to 4.5 billion euros, while the state aid accounted for 2.3 billion euros, thus this representing just over 51% of total expenditure for this purpose. Measures that did not constitute state aid were mainly those aimed at all entities in Slovenia under the same condition, non-selective measures. Measures aimed at natural persons not engaged in economic activity, such as vouchers, social assistance, and so on, and measures aimed at public services, health, and education. Data publishing in the state aid report 2019 to 2021 show that easily the greatest amount of state aid in Slovenia was granted to companies to reimburse 100% of the wage compensation for workers put on furlough by companies. The aid was thus granted under the first 6 and 8 intervention law. These aids were granted to the tune of 560 million euros and benefit fast 48,000 marker operators. This measure has clearly been very effective as Slovenia today has the lowest unemployment rate since the pandemic ended, and at the same time, many companies have been able to retain key personnel for their activities thanks to the measure, noting that economic growth in Slovenia since the end of the pandemic has also been above the EU average. In second place, in the terms of the value of aid, in the aid granted in the term of monthly basis income of 11 million euros is granted to 57,000 market operators.
Professor Bratina, we have 1 minute left.
Yeah. Then at the end, I can confirm all 3 hypotheses, and at the end, I want to say that the area of state aid is a very complex legal economic domain that continues to evolve and change depending on the objective set by the EU and actual world circumstances. Here I am thinking to particle crisis, energy crisis, and security crisis, which were both triggered by the war in Ukraine. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Bratina. And now I would like to invite kindly Professor Dr. Meira Festic to present her paper. You will share the screen, if we may ask you. We don't hear you, Mrs. Meira. Just put the microphone on. Pardon, and you cannot see me.
I would like to ask you kindly to present my paper, because
Okay, I will share it.
I had, yes, because I had lectures all
Yeah.
morning.
Okay. Sorry. Do you see the screen now? Do you see, Professor Festic, the screen?
Yes,
sharing?
yes, it's okay.
So the
So you can hear me. Okay.
yeah.
So a key issue for macroeconomic and reform programs in transition countries was whether the persistence of moderate inflation resulted from the traditional causes of insufficiently tight financial policies and wages pressures, or from the sizable adjustment of relative prices that were necessary for transition countries to accommodate to market-based economies. So we explained the key variables that contributed to stickiness of inflation in all transition economies, as well in Slovenia. Inflation inertia that reflected implicit or explicit wage indexation, then underlying pressure for appreciation for real exchange rate that was coupled with resisting nominal appreciation, insufficiently stimulation for foreign capital investment, and also the persistence of relative price variability that may reflect the limited speed of structural reforms in Slovenia and all transition economies in the 90s. So, the Bank of Slovenia has introduced specificities in its monetary policy, which that were accommodated to the state of the real sector. Bank of Slovenia has chosen, due to stable velocities and stable multipliers, two intermediate targets of monetary policy. Monetary targeting, and the Bank of Slovenia has chosen the widest monetary aggregate, and as well the exchange rate. So the Bank of Slovenia partially reached its final goal over exchange rate, and formally independent exogenous money stock was controlled by the formally dependent endogenous exchange rate formation. So due to this specificity, the Bank of Slovenia has introduced commercial papers that were nominated in foreign currency as well in domestic currency. And this approach has proven very good results, because we were able at the same time to lower the variability of nominal exchange rate. We managed to lower the inflation rate and to reach the stability of exchange rate and inflation at the same time. This was the preparation phase for fulfillment of the Maastricht criteria. And there were also some specificities that are stated here. We had surplus in the current account due to increased inflows of foreign currency. And the inflation and real appreciation movements could be explained as a consequence of the fact that prices of non-tradable sector, especially services, had been continuously increasing faster than prices in the tradable sector. We can say that some prices were lower in Slovenia due to this accommodation process of all transition economies, and excess liquidity of the money market, which was caused by the increased, was curbed by increased demand for foreign currency and increased demand for commercial papers issued by the Bank of Slovenia. We can say that money market had a surplus in majority in the whole period, which was also the result of the surplus in the current account. We can say that the approach of the Bank of Slovenia was unique. The exchange rate targeting demanded monetary intervention and sterilization due to exchange rate that had to be kept on a targeted level by intervention on the foreign exchange market. The flexible exchange rate was more or less a suitable approach, and the less rigid approach, because the Bank of Slovenia had the position of excess liquidity in the money on the money market. External shocks could be absorbed by exchange rate and interest rate movements, and stability stabilization of exchange rate was reached over a monetary shock being absorbed by interest rate. So combination of money stock, interest rate, and exchange rate movements. This was a very unique approach of the Bank of Slovenia, which has shown very good results in this preparation phase before entering into the Eurozone. We can also mention, according to what we stated before a few minutes, we can mention arguments against inflation targeting approach, which was suggested approach for Bank of Slovenia, but Bank of Slovenia has known very good the specificities of Slovenian economy, and therefore we can mention the arguments against inflation targeting. First, transition economies were required to solve the problems that initially resulted from inferior development. Second, according to theory, inflation targeting is deemed suitable when the real sector is stable. Third, inflation targeting approach contained considerable degree of what economists would define a policy discretion, which was not suitable for an economy that was facing the needs for establishment of a stable economic environment. Fourth, the flexibility of the central bank could be understood as the central bank accommodation of money stock intermediate target to money demand and potential output movements. As I said before, money demand and velocities were very stable in Slovenia, and these were the formal reasons that the Bank of Slovenia was capable to introduce monetary targeting as suitable approach. Then we can mention that inflation targeting was suitable in the cases of very high inflation rate per annum, and also the Granger causality tests from domestic household loans to real sector and to real consumption proved that there is not a very strong causal relation in Granger causality between increase in loans for households and inflation. So all conditions needed for successful inflation targeting could be denied according to this empirical approach. After the introduction of euro, the Slovenian inflation grew up to 12.9%, and the banking crisis has also shown the specificities of the Slovenian economy, also due to the fact that the banks were owned by the state, and as well that privatization model that was chosen was not suitable. And this interrelated ownership structure between the companies and the banking sector that was owned by the state were the cause of specificities of the banking crisis in Slovenia. The banking crisis after 2008 required both a state aid intervention and a change in the central bank supervisory practice. I mentioned the privatization model. The chosen model of privatization of state assets through the so-called PITs, special investment companies, allowed the creation of household companies, which were the least regulated entities in the forms of investment structure. So, in the initial stage, the ownership structure was highly dispersed. The stakeholders also had access to all information on the value of these special investment companies and or holding companies portfolio, which helped them to make informed decisions. And the owners and the management of holding companies has chosen precisely the moment for redemption of their own securities at a discount price from citizens who did not have this information. So this was specificity. Intervened corporate sector ownership and these intervened relationships were linked to the difficulties of banks and companies after 2008, and the leverage ratio at the beginning of the crisis in 2008 was around 136%, which means high indebtedness of the holding companies and also of the real sector. So The privatization model depleted real sector companies through their holding structure and ruined the business models of the real sector companies. So the consequence was that the poor creditworthiness of companies was transferred to the problems of the banking sector that were also owned by the state. And the consequence was also the need for recapitalization of the banks that were owned by the state. So we cannot ignore the fact that there were also existing problems within the real sector in Slovenia, which were transferred to the banking sector. In addition to the endogenous crisis in Slovenia, we could not talk about the balance sheet recession. But corporate indebtedness could only decrease with positive growth and revenues and profits, and the condition of unattainable, this condition was unattainable during the recession. The result was that the crisis was very difficult to manage, because important are three facts. First, the countries where the majority owned systemically important banks, the state banks did not start the recovery of the banks because they did not want to recapitalize them. And second, it was more important to try to save the companies by transferring the bad banking claims so that they were able to service their debts. And third, if the state replaced non-performing loans with bonds in banks, where the state was not the sole owner or guaranteed for non-performing loans, the state would contribute to increasing the capital of other owners. So the situation was in Slovenia very specific. But we managed to handle all these specificities, and we can say that the experience of the Slovenian economy, banking sector, real sector is good. In the European Union, so adoption of euro as a common currency eliminated exchange rate risk and Slovenia introduced euro area also. All regulations and directives, international laws, and this established a comparable macroeconomic and banking environment. The bank recovery took place in 2013 under state aid rules of the European Commission and other requirements. And we can say that Slovenia, as a small open economy, has accommodated its laws to the European Union and Euro area. And this integration process resulted in a comparable GDP structure, a single monetary and coordinated fiscal policy, insignificant speculative capital flows, which further strengthens the stability of interest rates, export competitiveness, and national economic accumulation as a potential for financing Slovenian own development. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Meira Festic, and thank you all lecturers today, speakers. I don't know, Professor Rado Bohinc, if there is some time for discussion, or we have to conclude now. Maybe if you are here, you can just give us the final word. If not, then if someone would like to add something, you are kindly invited.
Let me say a few words, if you permit. I think that here are the presentations, and if there is any discussion, if there is any question, we are absolutely open to give some additional comments.
Yeah, the rules stated by EU have been ruined by EU itself during the bank crisis.
And no comments left.
To whom are you putting this question?
This is just your opinion, or yes?
Can I answer to this question?
Yes, welcome.
Okay, this state aid rules, they were accommodated to the cycles of the European economies into deepness of the recession, and of course they were changed. But we can say that state aid rules that they are accommodated to the specificities of the euro area. And because we are the part of the Eurozone and the part of the European Union, we have to take into account account and also obey these rules because we are the member of the European Union. We could not avoid obeying these rules.
Thank you very much, Dr. Festic. Someone else would like to add something or any other topic?
I would like to thank all the presenters for the very high quality presentations. I hope this is a valuable contribution to the debate, which is ongoing now about the adaptation of European economic governance system, and also tax, state aid, and monetary policies. So thank you very much, and hope to see you in the next discussion.
Thank you all for being here at this event about public finances in Slovenia in the context of the European Union, economic governance and implementation of the fiscal rule. Thank you very much from Slovenia and wish you all the best. Goodbye.
Goodbye.